Hello everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial that will show you the process for customizing the meeting room booking system. My name's Jeremiah. I'm the systems librarian at Eastern Oregon University, and I like to make content that is relevant to libraries in the area of open source software and systems. So today I'm going to show you the process I use to customize the meeting room booking system. There are two examples I want to use specifically. One is to add a logo to the header. The other is to change the background color of the header. As we go through this process, you'll learn how to do other customizations as well. There's really only a few places to do this, these sorts of customizations. You can hack into the code, but we're not really going to look at that today. We're going to look solely at what MRBS offers in terms of customization out of the box. It is something, most of this stuff you need to do with command line. Some of it you can kind of do in the admin interface. We're probably not going to touch on the admin interface because that's kind of straightforward. Whereas the command line isn't straightforward at first, but I think after this video, my hope is it will become a little more straightforward for people. So what you're seeing here is my development environment, and I did a video on how to create this sort of test environment a few videos ago. I'll link to that in the upper right corner in case you're interested or want to build a similar test environment. I'm also going to put a link in the upper right corner for the series that I did on installing the meeting room booking system, just for reference in case people want to refer back to that for any reason. Now, before we get started, I think it is important to run a few commands in the command line. So I'm going to open up my terminal and let's see, so the very first thing you always want to do when you're messing with this stuff is the sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. Upgrade. And enter. I'm putting my password. And so at the moment, I'm completely up to date. The other thing I want to do is I like to use Chrome's browser tools. And out of the box, you don't get Chrome in Debian-based distributions. I'm also a little weary of the amount of tracking that is done through Chrome. So what I'm going to do is actually install the open source version, the one that's not proprietary, the one that Chrome is actually based on. Now it's still a Google product, and I guess I just have to trust that they're not going to be quite as bad with the watching me do everything that I do. Um, so I'm just going to go ahead and use Chromium. And the reason for this is I really like the developer tools. I wished I liked Mozilla Firefox's more as an open source project. I feel like there's a little more integrity there. However, maybe it's because I learned how to use developer tools in Chrome that makes me like it so much. But in any case, I'm going to show people how to install Chromium on a Debian-based server. So the very first thing, and we can do this through the apt repository, and that's great. It makes things so much easier. So what we need to do is sudo apt install chromium-common. And what this is going to do is, I believe it will install all of the dependencies that Chromium needs in order to actually be installed on the system. So that's the very first thing I'm going to do. Sudo apt install Chromium common, enter, and yes. Okay, so it doesn't take very long for that to install. The other thing we need to do is sudo apt install Chromium. And this will install the browser itself. So go ahead and hit enter. Okay, that one took a little bit longer. That's okay though. Let's see. Let's go ahead and open Chromium, and you can do that in this particular system by going to the little logo down here in the lower right corner or left corner. Sorry, and we go to Internet, and we have a choice of the browsers here. Now we just installed this, so it wouldn't be there unless you run the commands we just ran. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And the very first thing I want to do is I'm going to actually clear my cache first. I'm just going to go to Settings and Privacy and Security and Clear Browsing Data. And I'm going to set this to all time and clear data. So the reason I'm doing this is we're going to be working with CSS. And anytime you work with CSS, you want to use a private or incognito window. The reason for that is your browser caches a lot of CSS information. And when you go and make changes on the system, rather than use those changes, it's going to use what's cached in the browser itself. And so you could make changes to the CSS and then you refresh your page and then it appears nothing happened, when really it's just the CSS that is cached in your browser is being used rather than the update. So what I'm going to do is in this upper right corner, we want to click on the little three dots and we want a new incognito window. And what I'm going to do before anything else, I'm just going to minimize this, and the regular browser, I'm just going to close that. That way I don't get confused as to which tab is which. Okay, so we have Chromium installed. I'm going to open that back up, and I'm actually going to look at two different pages here. I want to do localhost. Oops, localhost. And so the tutorial that I linked to a little previously in the upper right corner, one of those shows you actually how to build this system. If you need to reference that, certainly go ahead and feel free to do that. The other thing is, I actually want to show our instance of meeting room booking system at EOU. So we can kind of compare between the two what's happening, and I guess we could probably just do a side-by-side comparison like that. And you'll see that there are differences here. So for example, we're calling it study room booking system because that's the only thing we really book here in our library. We don't actually, meetings are booked through Ad Astra, which is a nightmare, and that's why we chose to not allow our rooms to be booked through that and rather use this system so that we have complete control over it. So as we go through, I'm just going to compare things every once in a while just to give you a sense of what's going on. Now, first I'm just going to minimize that and maximize this. Okay, so you'll see that in this particular instance, I really only have one area and I have two rooms. I have room 1 and room 2. And what we want to do in this video is just figure out how do we make customizations. And I think I'm going to do a number of them, but really my main motivation here, my main motivation is I was requested to do a video on how to install logos as well as how to change the background color in the header. So that's going to be the main focus, but as we go through this, I'm going to show you other things just to give you a sense of how this is done, because really what you need to do is learn the process so that you don't have to use video tutorials for every little thing. It's kind of teach a person to fish, you feed them for life sort of deal. Let's go back to our terminal. I'll maximize this. And now the first thing we want to do is let's just go into the directory where the meeting room booking system lives. And we can do that with let's clear this. And we can get to that directory with the cd command, which is change directories. We'll do a / and var www html web. So in this case, I have our Apache server pointing to the web directory as the root directory for meeting room booking system. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And from here, it would be nice to see what the contents of this directory are, so we can use the ls command for that. ls, which just means list. And that's all we need to do. So we'll just hit enter. And we have a number of files and directories here that contribute to building the whole system. And there are a number of things here. I've actually gone through some of these functions files and I've made edits to it. I don't recommend that unless you really know PHP, and know that when you do updates, you need to ensure that uh, those files are going to get replaced. So you're going to have to come up with a way to work around that so that your customizations don't go away. But as I mentioned earlier, that's more advanced stuff, and I don't think that's really outside the scope of this tutorial. We really want to look at the tools that the developers of MRBS gave us in order to make customizations. So much easier to manage that way than it is to just kind of haphazardly go in and start changing the PHP code. So there are three important files that give us the tools we need in order to make these customizations. The one where we put everything in, the one that we actually the only one that we edit in this case is going to be the config.inc.php file. So let's just take a quick look at that. I'm going to use the less command, which is really a way of viewing the file without any possibility of making edits to it by mistake. So we're just going to look at this with the less command. And we'll do that just by typing less and then the name of the file. Now, I mention in every video, and I think it's important, when you're typing out a command, oftentimes you can just do the first couple of letters and it will autocomplete for you. So in this case, we have the config file. I just typed CO, and if I hit tab, it's going to autocomplete that for me. If I put in a dash and tab, then it will autocomplete this file. That's not what we want. We're just going to delete that. It's worth noting though. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we see our file here. It has been populated with the minimum set of configuration variables. And if we want to change anything in the system's default, which is where we're going to spend a lot of time in this video, or the area default, we need to copy those directives and put them in this file. So that's the process that we're going to use here, and you'll see how that works as we go along. But the important thing here is to know that we should not be editing area defaults or system defaults directly. We need to copy directives from those files and put them in here so that they're overridden. And the reason for that is when we update MRBS in the future, those system default and area default files are going to get replaced. So any work you do in there is going to be completely lost. So this configuration file, that's not the case. They're not going to overwrite this particular configuration file. So you get to keep it, and it doesn't mess your customizations up, so it works well. So it's very important to understand that this config file is where you do your edits. Okay, so with that out of the way, they've told us that they've populated with a minimum set of configurations, so that includes time zone. In my case, I'm on the west coast of the United States, so I have that time zone set up. You can get other time zones by clicking on this link here and just looking at that manual that shows you what the time zone codes are. Database settings, so this is very important. I believe this was probably set up in the videos where I showed how to install Meeting Room Booking System. We'll just keep scrolling here. And so at the bottom here, you'll see add lines from system defaults and area defaults below here so that you know those are the things that you've worked on. Okay, so we're going to come back to this file, but for now we're going to quit out of it. And the way to do that when you're using the less command is you just press the Q key, and that Q for quit, and that will take you out of the file. Next, I'm just going to quickly show you the area defaults file just so that you're aware of it. There's not much that I really want to do in here for this particular tutorial, and frankly, much of what you can do in this file you can actually do in the web admin interface. And the web admin interface is clearly much easier to use than using command line. It's easier, it's just, I think it's clearer when you make edits in the web admin file. But in any case, let's just take a quick look at the area defaults. And I'm going to use the less command again. And area defaults, and I use tab to autocomplete. We'll hit enter. And I love how they tell us in big bold letters, do not modify this file yourself. So remember that. I can't stress it because you're going to lose all of your work when you do an update if you don't. Okay, now we have a number of settings here that we can deal with. We have the calendar settings, so you have this enable periods equals false. I'm going to quickly show you, you can actually do this in web admin, but I want to show you what the difference is. First, we have our EOU study room booking system. And we have things set up so that they're periods. So periods have been enabled here, whereas in my test environment they have not. So we'll compare them side by side. Let's minimize that. So somehow that was configured for periods. Why is that? That shouldn't be. I'm going to show you what to do here. So I'm going to log in to the admin interface. Okay, and so the way we would change in the web admin rather than using the command line is we just click on rooms, and there's only one area to edit here, and I just did floor 1. If there was more than one floor, you know, if you did another add area, well, let's just do that quickly. Floor 2 and add area, and just call this room 3, add room. Okay, so now we have 2 areas. Now, floor 1 has 2 rooms in it, and we can edit it by clicking on this little icon here. And so you'll see that periods are enabled, and I must have done that by accident as I was setting things up. I'm just going to click on times because this is the out-of-box view that you're going to get. And you know, when you do periods, you have the opportunity of adding more periods. So let's see, period 4, add period. And then they just, that's what we have here at EOU. So we actually have our time slots at the top of the page rather than the side. But in any case, I named our periods 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. not because we do it in 1 hour blocks, and it was just easier for us to manage with periods than it was times. I don't really think one is better than the other. It's just, you know, what suits your user base. So I'm going to go ahead and re-enable times, and I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to click save, and then I'll just click in the upper left corner here. And so we have times displayed here, and wow, it looks like it's by minute, which is crazy. You could probably reset that in rooms or in the area defaults. Resolution in minutes, default duration. That's weird. I wonder why that is. Because the default duration is within 60 minutes. Well, in any case, that's kind of outside of the scope of this. I think it's a matter of just kind of playing around with things in the web admin to kind of figure out what you can do there. And, you know, obviously, you probably want to do that in a test environment before you start setting things up in a production environment, because clearly we don't want to book things by the minute. And now we want to take a look at the system's default. But before we do that, I think what I want to do is open up a new terminal, because what we should do is have one terminal to copy our directives and another terminal where we're going to paste them into. And so what I'm going to do is open this new terminal for the ones where we're pasting into the config file. So let's see, we need to go to that directory. So again, we need cd var www html web and enter. And now that I actually want to make edits, I'm not going to use the less command. I'm going to use the nano editor. With less, we didn't need to be a sudo user, and the sudo user is your admin or root user, you know, the account that has complete control over everything. Now my user is a sudo user, so I can use this command to say, hey, use my admin privileges to make these changes because I'm not actually root. Okay, so we can do that with sudo nano, and well, let's see, let's list things. Actually, I'm going to do the ls-la just to show you. Root owns everything in this directory, and that's a good thing. So in order to make any edits to this, I have to use sudo because I don't own this. It just keeps things secure. Now we want to go back and look at the config file here, which we've already taken a look at. But in any case, we're going to do that with sudo nano and config, and I'm just going to hit tab to autocomplete and enter. Put my password in there. Okay, so in this terminal, we're going to make edits, and then in this other terminal here, we're going to get our directives. And I don't want to make any changes to the system's default because remember, we want to take the directives from there and put them in the config file. So I'm going to use the less command again. System defaults, a good time to use tab to autocomplete. It's a long one. Okay, and so here in this file, you're going to find all sorts of settings. There's a lot of stuff here, and we're not going to touch on all of it. It would take many, many hours to do that. But more often than not, or really the approach that I like to take when I need to edit something and I don't know if it exists in this file, searching using the less program is really easy. And so you'll see down here at this colon, we have a cursor. And if I hit the /, that's going to change into search mode. And so I can actually look for things here. So for example, in this case, one of our main goals here is to add a logo. And I'm not going to do that right away, but what I like to do is when I need to make a customization, I know it's the logo, I'm just going to use that as a keyword and search this document to see if it exists. And if it does, then, great. And so you'll see here we're brought to a couple of lines, company logo, additional information, all that. So that's what this section is doing here. And you can see here that, yeah, you can indeed add a logo to this document. Now I wonder if there's other things that we can do with the logo. Right now it's just adding it. And you can continue searching through the less viewer. If you click on the N button, it'll have you just go to the next instance of logo. So really we're looking at this instance. I hit N and again, it's going to look at this one. Hit N again, it goes to this one. So at this point, if I hit N, see if it exists in other places, it looks like it does. Oh no, it's a log out. So it's finding that log, those 3 characters, regardless of what shows up after it. So, I can keep hitting the N button, and you'll see that really the logo is only going to appear in that one place. And if I scroll up, you'll see just how massive this document is. We just kind of keep going and going. Okay, it's not super massive. I think it's only like 2,000 lines or something, or 1,700. But in any case, what I'd like to do before we add the logo is just kind of go through the document a little bit until we get to that point, just to show you what sorts of things we can do. So in this particular file, if we wanted to, if we're having problems with our system and we want to run it in debug mode, we can come here and change this false directive to true. I actually think it's okay to go ahead and make that change directly in this file. And the reason for that is when you're in a production environment, like if there's your production environment, something goes wrong with it, you want to change it to true so you can pinpoint what the problem is, but then you're going to want to come back after you figure out what the problem is and set this to false, because this debug information could give hackers information they need to get into your system. Okay, so we also have time zone settings. I think our config file already has that in it. And I guess some of this stuff I don't completely understand what it is for time zones. But if you're interested, I would encourage you to just kind of play around with it and see what these various things do. Database settings, so that's another thing that's in our config file. As you'll see, time zone is already set here, database settings is already set here, and that's really it. I don't think there's anything extra. I think everything that you see here for the database settings is also going to appear here. Um, okay, so let's scroll through that. MySQL driver options. That is more advanced customization stuff. I don't think, well, it's outside the scope of this video. Site identification information. So this is going to be a section that I think many people are going to be interested in. So we're going to spend a little bit more time here. I'm going to open this up. Okay. So some things that we can do here. I'm not sure what default site is or multi-site is. Again, it's if you're interested in playing around with that, I would encourage you to do so. Now, if we need to set the administrator and the administrator email, we can do that here. We have we can change the company name here. So currently, you'll see with Meeting Room Booking System, it's set to your company, which that's not what we want. So we'll change that. We've also noted the logo can be done here. Let's see if there's anything else here. Maybe this additional information, maybe we want to add some of that. Maybe we'll try this company URL. So yeah, I think this whole section actually, let's copy all of this section here. Oh, I guess let's see here. I guess that's the problem with using the less command. I'm not going to be able to get everything. I'm just going to copy anyway. So MRBS admin is what we've copied up to. I'm going to copy that. Come over here into our config file. Scroll down to the section where add lines from system defaults is. Okay, let's paste all of that stuff that was there. Okay, so the MRBS admin. Let's get the rest of that section. And let's see, we did it up to MRBS admin. So really not much more to put in there. And let's copy that. Now, if we used Nano here, it would have been easier. I should have done that. I hadn't thought of that. I didn't think I was going to copy so much code anyhow. Okay, now I'm going to have to put my cursor down here and paste the rest. Okay, so in this config file, we can start making our edits. So we will start here at the top. Like I said, I don't actually know exactly what this stuff is here, so I'm just going to take that out. I'm going to take all of that out. And actually, there's quicker ways of doing this than the delete button. But I forget how to do that, so I'm just going to do it this way. Okay, so very first thing, MRBS admin. So in my case, here at the Eastern Oregon University Library, that would be me. So just put my name in there. Okay, and then here, admin email, I'm just going to put that in. Okay, and it looks like they have a note here. There are more email addresses and email settings below, so there's more email settings we can do down there. Just going to open this up a bit. Okay, company name is mandatory, so here we don't want it to be your company. We want this to be whatever your organization name is. So here we have, I'm just going to do EOU library. And a little bit further down here, we have MRBS company logo. I'm going to uncomment that. And so these two little forward slashes comment out the code. So if you have those two forward slashes at the beginning of a line, or even further into the line, it's going to make it so that the system doesn't read that variable. Okay, so we want to add a logo. We've uncommented that. We'll come back to that quickly. Let's just finish off everything else. So the more company info, let's just uncomment that so that we can see what it looks like. I'm not going to put in new text there because this is really just a demonstration. Okay, next we have a company URL in the header. So maybe I want to try that. I'm going to uncomment that and maybe we'll put our library website into this variable. Let's see, so we've got library.uu.edu. Okay, I'm not using a proxy environment, so I'm not going to worry about that. And I guess it's best to kind of take those things out that you're not going to use. So I'm just going to delete all of that. Okay, now let's go back to the logo. What I need to do is put the logo. So what they're saying is this example assumes that the image file is in the MRBS directory. So when they say the MRBS directory, they mean the root directory of the system. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to open up yet another terminal. And so I'm currently in my home directory. If I just list what's there, oops, ls. I have recently downloaded my image to this downloads file or directory. So I'm just going to cd into that, change directories, just download. And this is case sensitive, so you're going to have to use capitals. And I'm just going to list what's there. And I have two logos here. I'm going to move both of those into the MRBS root directory. And I'm going to do that. We're going to need to use the sudo command for that because root owns the directory that MRBS lives in. So we'll do sudo mv for move, and then whoops, EOU, and I'm just going to do tab to autocomplete and .ping. And the other one I'm also going to move there, underscore small. And so the reason why I'm using these two is I want to demonstrate that you must size your image yourself using an image editor or something like that, because MRBS will not, at least not in any way I could find, will not resize the image for you. Sudo mv for move, and then the two image files, and enter. Oh, nope, actually, sorry. First we need to go, we need to tell the command where to drop these files, where to move them to. And so it's in the /var. You know, actually, I'm not sure that's going to work. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the second one, and I'm just going to do up to horizontal, and then I'm going to put an asterisk, which means everything that matches up to this point and more gets moved. So that's how we're going to approach this, because I'm not sure that doing two files with the move command will work. So the root directory for MRBS is var www html web, and we can go ahead and hit enter. I'll put in my password. Okay, now if I use the ls command to list the contents of this directory, the downloads directory, it's empty, and that's what we want. Now I'm going to cd change directories into the MRBS root directory and ls, and we'll see that those logos are here now. So the first one I'm going to put in there just to demonstrate what happens if it's big is this top one. We'll come back and do the small one later. We'll have to reconfigure that. So I'm going to go here to our config file, and this isn't actually our config file. Too many windows open. Too many terminals open. Okay, we're going to come in here, change the name of this logo file, and because it's in the root directory, it should be found. Oh, geez, I hit copy rather than paste by mistake. Sorry about that. Just go back here. I'm glad I kept this window open. I almost closed it to make things easier. Okay, now we'll just paste this in here. All right, so we got that. We got our logo. Looks like we've got everything else. Okay, I'm going to press Control S to save. I don't really want to get out of this quite yet. I'm going to go back to the browser for Meeting Room Booking System, and I'm going to refresh the page. And now we've got this giant logo here. So you see that's a little too big, or actually a lot too big. It doesn't look so bad, I guess. Here, I'd probably want to increase the size of these if that was the case, but we'll kind of get into that with the CSS portion of things anyhow. I'm not seeing the library URL. I guess I expected that. Remember when we put in the link here. I feel like that should appear somewhere in here. I'm going to click on the logo and see if that takes us. Oh, I see. So it's the link for the logo. I don't like doing it that way because when people are navigating through here, we're all kind of trained to click here to go to the home of the web page, but it's going to end up taking us to the library website. I think if you click over here, it brings you to the no, that brings you to the library website too. So maybe that's useful in some cases. I don't find it particularly useful, so I think I'm going to actually comment that out. Okay. So we uncommented this additional information. Let's make sure that showed up. You can put additional information here. So, yep, we can definitely do that. What else did we do? We changed the company name to EOU Library. So it was your organization here, but now it's EOU Library. And I guess there's not really a way to check on that stuff there. I'm sure there is. I just don't know what it is and don't want to waste people's time looking for it. Okay, so we want to fix that logo issue, and I have a smaller version of the logo that I edited using GIMP. Let's see, what did I call it? Small. Now if I do Control S, that will save things. Let's see if we've got a more reasonably sized logo here. So click that. Yeah, that looks a lot nicer. Now I'm hovering over this. I guess, oh, I don't like that. So I think if you wanted this logo to be clickable, probably the best approach here would be copy your URL. And clickable as in you click it and it takes you to the home page. I think what you'd want to do is come back and uncomment the company URL again. And let's just delete all of that and then paste in the URL for the booking system. Oops, I had all of it in there. I didn't realize that. Okay, let's delete that out because that will cause problems if we don't. Control S, we'll go back to our system, reload it, and now that will take us to the home page of our booking system. Okay, great. Let's go back to, let's see, to the system default configuration file that we have opened with the less command. Let's take a quick look through here. So we can set different themes, and there's really only two. There's default and classic, and right now we're using default. I honestly don't know what classic looks like, but I would encourage folks to take a look at that. Just play around with that. Here's one that's important, and we're going to come back to this in a little bit, but you can use a custom CSS URL. It's commented out right now. Currently, it's not being used. This particular directive isn't being used. We're just getting the out-of-box CSS. But when we go to make changes to the CSS, this is something we're going to want to do. Rather than do that right now, simply because I'm going to have different chapters in this video, and I don't want people that are just going to look at the CSS to miss this part, so we're going to come back to this. You can do the same with JavaScript. I'm not going to get into JavaScript in this video. I'm not, I can use it for the most part, but I'm certainly not an expert at it, so I'm just going to not bother with that. And it really does get into much more advanced customizations, and here we're just looking at simple customizations. So we have calendar settings. I think they just tell us that. So what they're telling us here really is you can't have periods and times set up at the same time in one area. However, you can configure each area to use whatever you want. A little bit about time settings. They're telling us just to look in area defaults. Period settings, again, we need to look in area defaults, which we've already done. Booking policies, this is another thing that kind of shows up in the area defaults, but I think this is just system-wide. So yeah, global policy settings. So if you're setting up individual areas, you would use the area defaults. If you just want a booking policy for the entire site, this is where you would come to find those directives. I'm just going to scroll a bit through these, and I have played around with these. I just don't remember exactly what I did. So I think it's pretty easy to figure out if you just kind of play around with settings in a test environment to see what happens. Definitely encourage people to do that. Display settings, so you get to decide what day of the week starts. So out of the box, it's going to be Sunday. But if you want your week to start on Monday, you could just put a 1 in here. And then they let us decide what days of the week are weekdays. So it looks like 0 and 6 are weekends. 0 would be Sunday. Um, Saturday would be 6. You can set up your holidays array here. Now, when I first set this meeting room booking system up, and we actually use a Docker container for this, and starting to regret that. It's so much easier just to come into the server itself and make these changes. I'm not a fan of Docker. It's kind of a pain to use. I understand for, major, large, really large systems, maybe it's helpful, but for this, I just find it more of a hassle than anything else. But in any case, when we set it up, holidays was not available, and I actually had to go into the code and really severely edit things to make it so that holidays would show up. But you don't have to do that anymore, so that's great. And I haven't played around with this yet, so I would encourage people to play around with that as well. Time formats, so the 24-hour format, false would show dates in 12-hour format. So I think what that is you know, with the 12-hour format, 1 p.m. would be 1, whereas the 24-hour format, 1 p.m. would actually be 13 because it's 24 hours rather than just 12-hour increments. So we can format dates and times in here. So I did play around with this a little bit because what I wanted to do was try to get this particular display to be different. The thought was it was requested that we would make it day, month, year. I really looked into that, and those settings that we just saw don't actually affect this. From what I can tell, it's kind of a JavaScript thing that makes this appear the way it does, and I just couldn't figure out what that was. So I would consider changing this a more advanced customization, and outside of the scope of this video. But I think you can change like how dates are displayed here. And here. So I would encourage people, if you're interested in changing times or the way a date is displayed, play around with this a little bit and see what happens when you change these things. And I think, to do that, you would have to figure out what each one of these means. And I don't know what they all are off the top of my head. I know this Y here shows the year in 4 digits. Not sure what the others do. Like, I think that's time related. That's day. I'm not sure what the B is. But in any case, if we could search for those codes. I think it would just be PHP time codes, maybe. I can't remember. I can't remember where to find those. Yeah, that's not what we're after. We don't want time zones. We want time codes. Maybe that space there. PHP date and time. There we go. So if you just do a search for PHP date space codes, it'll bring you here. And let's see. I wish they had a list. Why don't they have a list of the codes? They should have a list of the codes. Let's do the PHP time manual. Let's see. No, they don't. I'm going to pause the video and figure this out. Okay, I think I figured it out. What we need to do is I'm just going to open the terminal, and here I'm just going to copy this function and go back to my browser, and I'm going to paste that in there, and then I'm just going to put in PHP so we know what language we're looking for. I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and I think this very first one, the string f time, I guess, is what that would be. I'm just going to click on that. And this lists all of the different codes. So if you come to this site, these are the characters that you can use to edit this here. So I highly encourage people to play around with that. Okay, let's, yeah, all sorts of times that can be changed in different places. It makes me feel like we should have been able to change that. If anyone figures that one out, please leave a comment below. I'd be very interested to see how that's done. Okay, let's continue going through this file. A lot of stuff I'm not sure what it means. Would be fun to play around with when I'm not actually doing a video. But that does give a good sense. I mean, there's quite a bit going on here that we can do. Some miscellaneous settings. Not fully sure what these are showing us. We can do some private booking settings. Settings for approving bookings per area, although that's done in area defaults. We got some form values. Again, these are things that I'm not fully sure. It looks like they're all commented, and it looks like you can set up catering options and things like that. So I think some of these are kind of used for things other than meetings, because you can use this system to book other things as well. Um, Products, spaces, items, whatever. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else here that looks interesting. There's a lot going on. Authentication settings. So there's a few that you can use that are kind of neat. We use SAML here, and of course our network admins kind of helped me set that one up, so I don't know a lot about that. Yeah, so I think as you come up with customizations that you would like to do, it really makes sense to open this system defaults file using less and just use the / and you know just search for keywords and see if you can find where that customization can be done. So, let's say for example, now that I think of it, maybe the next thing we want to do is look at how do we change the color of the header. So maybe this file might be worth coming in and we'll just type in header and see if we can find anything related to changing the color. Uh, no, that doesn't look good. We'll do N to continue. Pattern not found. I think that has to do with the fact that kind of started towards the end of the file rather than at the very top. Um, let's see what's going on with all that. Okay. Oops. Let's delete all that. I don't know what this log file thing is. Wow, that's really long. I think I'm going to quit out of that. Nope. I'm going to close that out. I'm just going to use this one here. Less system defaults. Okay. So we'll be at the top of the file, and I can just do a / and let's do header. Company logo is mandatory. It's used in the header. We've already done that. More on the logo. Can't change the colors there. We can go ahead and hit N for next. Okay, so it looks like we have some promising things here in this section. So under themes, it's telling us that the header.inc file, which contains the function used for producing the header. This enables organizations to plug in their own header functions quite easily in cases where the desired corporate look and feel cannot be changed using the CSS alone. So what that's telling us is there is a file that exists, this header inc file, where we can change some of the CSS. And so I think that's the best route to go at this point. So that's where we're going to look at changing the header color. Okay, just to keep things clean, I don't think I need this system default file anymore. Now, usually when I want to change CSS, the very first thing I do is I look at the element that I want to change. So in this case, we have the header. We want to change color from this blue to something else. If I click left click on the header and then choose the inspect option down at the bottom here, I'm shown the container, and I want the full banner. So you can kind of move your cursor to highlight everything or the area that you want to do, and we really want to customize the entire color here of the header. So once the option I want is highlighted, I'm going to click on that, and then we get some CSS down here, and it looks very much like this is the CSS directive that's giving the background color there. If I unclick it, let's see, oops, I clicked the wrong thing. If I unclick it, it takes out that CSS and then it just looks like this. I'm going to re-click that for now. And one thing you can do is they tell you what file that lives in. If you click on that, it'll open up the CSS and it kind of brings you to that page. But this isn't actually the file that we're going to need, because MRBS told us in the system's default that there is a header file that will allow us to make this kind of change. So we don't actually have to go right into the CSS document to make this change. And I think the reason for that is I'm not sure, maybe the header file doesn't get replaced when updates are made. Yeah, I'm not fully sure on that. In any case, we want to change this. So I'm just going to close out that developer tool for now. I'm going to go back to the terminal. And let's see, we're in the config file. So we can exit from this by doing Control X. We already saved things. If we hadn't, it would have asked if we wanted to. So the system's default file here told us that we can change certain CSS settings under the theme. So what I'm first going to do is change directories into themes, list what's there. So we have classic and default. As you may recall, in the system's default, we have it set to default rather than classic. I don't know what the classic looks like. At some point, I'd like to give that a look, but now's not the time for that. So we're going to go into the default theme, list the contents there, and our system's defaults PHP file told us that we could make those changes in the header inc file. And I apologize, I think I said that header.inc was the target we were after, but that's not true at all. That's if you want to change some of the HTML within the header, and that's a little outside the scope of this video. So we're just looking at the CSS, which is the styling.inc file. So we're going to look at that with sudo nano styling.inc. Okay, so here we can set PHP variables for all of these different colors here. So we're not after the background of the main body. We're not after the default font color. Background color for headers. This is the one that we're after here. And so what it's doing is it is taking the banner back color, which is this color right here. And so you'll see that these colors are hexadecimal values, and none of us have this memorized. So I think it's probably a good idea to show people how you go about getting these values. And I use an online tool for this. Let's see, let's do a search for I use W3 Schools color picker. So I'm just going to do a search for that. And we got the HTML color picker. This is what we're after. So you can kind of play around with this to get whatever color you want. You can move the click throughout here. You can make lighter and darker values by doing this, and you'll notice that every time I click on something we get a new value here. So the very first one is the hexadecimal, and then we have the RGB that we could also use. I see both pretty much about the same. So, but in any case, they're using hexadecimal with the meeting room booking system, so that's probably the best way to go. I'm going to go ahead and make the background white. I don't think that's the greatest choice, but I'm doing it just to kind of lead into other issues that kind of crop up when you make these sorts of changes. So you'll see with the white, it's just a bunch of, what is that, 6 F's after the pound sign, after the number sign. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to our styling file, and let's see, it was banner back color that the header is using. And if you wanted the banner to be different from the header, and I'm not sure why you would want to do that, you could just make that edit directly right here, but because it is referencing this other variable, so the header back color variable is referencing the banner back color variable. Banner back is up here, so this is really what we want. This is where we want to make our edit. I'm just going to come in here. So that that we're deleting is that kind of light blue color. Paste that in there. And then if I do Control S, that'll save things. And let's go back. Whoops, that's the EOU one. I think we're done looking at that. I'm just going to close that. Okay, so now if I refresh here, we now have that white background there. But the thing is, we don't see our links up in this corner. So if we're changing it to white, we're also going to have to change these font colors. And we can do that in that same style or styling.inc file. So let's go back to that. And here we have the header font color, which changes the color for text and headers. So, maybe using this default font color is what we want to do. And rather than copy and paste this code, which you could do, and I don't think there's really anything wrong with that, but just to kind of show how things work, we could just set this header font color variable to reference the standard font color variable. And pretty much the same thing that happens down here. So we could just put in the $sign, which I believe denotes it as a variable, standard underscore font, or we could have copy and pasted this too. And what that should do is set the header font colors to the default font colors. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control S. We'll go back to our browser, and then if I refresh, we should now, CSS actually got cached here, and this is why the new setting is not showing up. Well, this is a really good example of how much of a pain this can be sometimes working with CSS. Let's see. I think probably the best approach here is I'm just going to close this incognito window. I'm going to open up a new Chromium browser. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to Settings. I'm going to go to Privacy and Security. I'm going to clear browsing data, clear data. Let's go back to incognito, go to localhost. And now our fonts are showing up in the right color. Usually with incognito, if you right click on this, you often get an option for clearing the cache and doing a hard reload. So I don't know what's going on there. Now if I go ahead and log in, this will help us. This will help us see, that it actually took. So we may be able to see these now, but maybe we want them a little bigger. That seems kind of small to me. Now the way that I would go about doing this, I mean, the very first thing is you would probably want to go through this default themes file to see if you can find anything about font sizes. And really the only thing I see is we can change the font family if we wanted to. I don't see anything about sizing. Maybe it's worth searching for keywords. So if we did Control W, we could just do font size, and font size wasn't found. We could also do Control W and just size and see what that gives us, and nothing again. So we're not going to be able to make those font size changes here. We're going to have to do that elsewhere. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's get out of this styling.inc file. I think we're done here. So Control X will get us out of the nano editor. And of course, I don't really know off the top of my head where do I go to change that font size. So the approach that I like to take, actually no, I'll keep that where it is. The approach I like to take is similar to what I did with the banner, kind of looking at where the CSS for the color of the header was. So it's the same approach here. I'm just going to click on, we'll just click on this help button, and I'm going to inspect that. And let's see, I'm going to make sure it's highlighted. And what we can do is look at the CSS file here. Geez, can I? In any case, I'm going to look at the CSS information here, and what we're looking for is font size. So here we have okay, there's font size small. What if I unclick that? That increases the font size for everything. And honestly, I think that's probably the better approach to change the font size of the body. It kind of increases all of the font sizes throughout the system, and it makes it a lot easier to see. Now we could also come here and inspect that and look for the font size for that, and it looks like the body was overridden, so header banner is the font size there. I don't see a font size. Oh, here we go. So it's under banner.company. So I could do, if we undo or if we uncheck that font size, you'll see that specifically, this right here, the size is changing to a smaller font. So it would be possible to go in and change that specifically if that's all we wanted to. And maybe that's just what we'll do to kind of pinpoint things a little easier. So we're really only focusing on this rather than the whole site. So we have the information we need to do that. When you're using the developer tools, we can see that the CSS for this is .banner.company, and it exists in this MRBS CSS such and such file. So if you click on that, it gives you the full CSS. Actually, make that a little bigger. So it's really this block here, and not even that block. It's really all we want is to change that. So the process for that is we know that this file is called mrbs.cs.php. There are a number of ways of finding that sort of thing. More often than not, the sort of thing is going to be in the root directory. And so the command I'm doing here is cd go back one directory, go back one directory. So I'm going to go back two directories. And usually you'll find CSS information within the root directory of the system. So if I do ls, you'll see that we have a CSS directory here. I'm going to cd into that CSS directory and list the contents there. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go back here and get the name of that CSS file. Okay, how do we go back? I'm not sure how we go back. I'm going to have to restart. Inspect. So it looks like there. And this banner. So it is our CSS mrbs.cs.php. So I'm looking for the mrbs.css.php. Okay, I'll go back here. MRBS. So that's this one right here. Now we're going to want to do this so that we customize it in a way where when we do updates, it's not going to change, because if we do an update, chances are this file is going to get replaced, and if we do it straight in the CSS, that's going to undo all of the work we've done. So what I'm going to do is let's use the less command. I'm going to use the less command to view the MRBS or CSS file. So les mrbs.css.php. And what I like to do is actually search for the elements that we're after. So this .banner.company, I'm just going to copy it, and go back. And now if we press the / button, you'll see down here you get a little prompt for searching now, and we've already been through this, but just as a reminder, this is how you search when you're using less. And I'm going to paste those two elements in here. So I'm going to search for that specific element. I'm going to hit enter, and you see that it shows up a couple of times here. This is not what we're actually after, and I actually forget what all of this means, but in any case, this is the chunk of CSS that we want. And I think all we really need is the font size, but I'm going to copy the whole thing regardless, and copy all of that. Okay, and at this point I'm going to do Q to quit from the less command. And recall that when we were looking through the system's default inc file, we could use a custom CSS file, and I'm going to create that right now. So I'm going to do sudo nano custom.css. This isn't going to work right away because we need to go back into the system defaults and set things up so that we can use the custom CSS. So I'm going to open up this new file that doesn't actually exist. We're creating it. And I'm just going to paste that CSS into this file. And I just want a space there because it looks weird. Okay, now if I do Control X and save to modified buffer, yes, I'm going to hit the Y button for that. And file name to write to, we don't want to change the name, so we're just going to hit enter. Now if I do ls, you'll see that we have this custom CSS. Now we need to set it up so that the system actually uses this file rather than just defaulting to this. So this custom CSS file is going to, whatever you put in here, it's going to override this file. Okay, let's cd and then 2 periods to go back one directory. I'm going to type less system defaults and use tab to autocomplete and enter. And I'm going to do a /. I want to look for CSS. Okay, so we're now at this point where we can change the CSS. So I'm going to copy this code right here and then hit the Q button to quit out of less. And then we're going to do sudo nano config.inc.php and I hit tab to autocomplete. We'll just scroll down to the bottom here and we'll paste that directive right here. And now we need to uncomment that. And so now MRBS knows to look into the CSS directory. So this config file lives in the same directory as the CSS directory. So it's a relative path. It's relative to where this document is. So it knows to look in the CSS directory and at the custom CSS file. We should be good here. I'm going to Control X to exit, Y to save, enter to accept the name. Now if we go back to Meeting Room Booking System to the page, refresh, and actually I forgot to change the value. So what I'm going to do is go back into the cd into CSS and then sudo nano custom.css. So I never changed the font size, which is why we're seeing that problem. I'm going to use the rather than pixels, I'm going to do this in EM. So what I would like to do is 1.75 M. And using M rather than pixels is a better approach, particularly with something like this, because when you use M or REM, what happens is it allows the user to adjust font sizes within their browser, making it more accessible. So this is an accessibility thing. Pixels, I suspect they probably have their place in certain instances, but in this case, I'm just going to use the EM. I'm going to make it a little bit more accessible for people. And 1 EM is pretty much the equivalent of 16 pixels, but it can be customized and adjusted within the browser, whereas if you use pixels, you're stuck with the 16. I'm going to go and press Control S to save and then Control X to exit. And now when we come back here, this should change the size of this particular text. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh and you'll see that that is now bigger. Okay, now we could do the same thing and just, kind of reset text sizes throughout the whole system. And we already found out that the directive within the body itself has a default setting for that. So what I'm going to do is less MRBS.css. So this is the main CSS file for the entire system. I'm going to hit enter, and right at the very top is body. And if we wanted to search for it, because you're not always going to find it right at the top, again, it's /. I would look for body, and it's going to give us all of the different places where body is referenced. But we want the entire system to have a slightly bigger font, so I'm just going to copy all of that. Q to quit out of less. If I hit the up arrow on my keyboard, I can get to sudo nano custom.css and not have to type it all out again. So it was just 2 clicks of the up button to get there. I'm going to hit enter. And just because I'm weird, I feel like body should appear above banner. So I'm going to paste that and then
rather than this font size small, I think I'm going to change it to font size large. Now you could also do pixels or EM or REM or any of that, but just to kind of show how this works. Although I seem to recall that, well, let's see what happens when we do this. Let's do Control S to save. Let's come back over to our page. If we refresh, it should. Actually, I must have done something weird with the CSS. And I did. I didn't, I copied and pasted, and I didn't have that body directive in there. So I, I didn't copy the B. Um, so now it should work. If I do Control S to save, if we go back to the meeting room booking system and I reload, you'll see that the fonts are much bigger now. And so if I log in, let's illustrate that a little bit more. Okay, so it looks like the fonts here are a little different than what's going on with the rest of the system. Of course, this looks much bigger than it should. I'd probably come back and change that in the CSS. So I would encourage folks to just go ahead and play around with that sort of stuff. I've kind of shown you how it's done. Now, you can go out there and play around with it and, um, you know, really engage with it and learn how to actually use it. Um, because, the settings that we have here, this isn't perfect and it wasn't meant to be. So, you'll notice that here the text is being cut off because I've increased the size of the CSS. So it's really a matter of kind of figuring out, well, do you want to make this box bigger? There's ways of doing that by using a lot of the techniques that we've done. Okay, so that covers how the process that I use anyway, on how to go about making customizations to the meeting room booking system. I really do hope that you all found this helpful. It's not quite as straightforward as your typical installation. I find, development, there's an art to it, and I may not necessarily have the artistic chops to really make the user interface look the way others might want it to. But in any case, should you find that you have questions, I'm certainly happy to try to answer them if I can. Sometimes I'm a little too busy to really put much time into the YouTube channel, but anytime that I can, I always make the effort to do so. So I would encourage you to ask questions, leave comments below. Maybe other people can answer questions too. So with that, I really hope you found this interesting and helpful, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.